He was called El Libertador, the Liberator, a name that echoes through the Andes, across the plains, and into the heart of a continent. But who was the man behind the legend? Who was Simón Bolívar, the figure who dreamed of a united South America, free from the chains of colonial rule? His story isn't just one of battles and political decrees. It's a dramatic saga of ambition, love, betrayal, and a relentless pursuit of an ideal that would both define and ultimately consume him. Born in 1783 in Caracas, into one of the wealthiest Creole families in Venezuela, young Simón was not destined for revolution. He was an aristocrat, orphaned at a young age, and sent to Europe for a classical education. In Spain, he found love, marrying the beautiful María Teresa Rodríguez del Toro y Alaísa. Their happiness was tragically brief. Less than a year after returning to Venezuela, she died of yellow fever. A heartbroken Bolívar swore never to marry again. This personal tragedy ignited a profound change. He returned to Europe not as a carefree socialite, but as a man searching for a purpose. In Paris, amidst the intellectual fervor following the French Revolution, and in Rome, standing on the historic Aventine Hill, Bolívar found his calling. Alongside his friend and former tutor, Simón Rodríguez, he made a solemn vow. He would not rest until he had broken the chains that bound his homeland to Spain. It was an audacious promise, a declaration of war against one of the world's mightiest empires. But the path to liberation was paved with failure. His first attempts to incite rebellion in Venezuela were disastrous. He was branded a traitor and forced into exile, first in Curaçao, then in Cartagena, in what is now Colombia. It was here, in his darkest hour, that Bolívar's genius truly began to shine. He didn't surrender to despair. Instead, he wrote, "The Cartagena Manifesto was a brilliant, ruthless analysis of his own failures and a strategic blueprint for victory. He argued that disunity was the real enemy, and that only a strong, centralized government could lead the colonies to freedom. With a small, ragtag army, he launched a campaign that seemed impossible. The admirable campaign of 1813 was a lightning-fast military marvel. In a matter of months, he fought his way back across the Andes and into Caracas, earning the title El Libertador for the first time. But victory was fleeting. The Spanish forces, led by ruthless commanders, launched a brutal counterattack. The Second Republic of Venezuela collapsed, and Bolívar was once again in exile, this time in Jamaica and Haiti. It was in Haiti, a nation born from its own successful slave revolt, that the revolution was reborn. President Alexandre Pétion offered Bolívar refuge, money, and weapons, but on one crucial condition, that he promises to abolish slavery in the lands he liberated. Bolívar agreed. This was a pivotal moment. The fight for independence was now inextricably linked with the fight for social justice and human freedom for all. What followed was the stuff of legend. The epic crossing of the Andes in 1819 is one of the greatest feats in military history. Leading his army, which included British and Irish legionnaires, through treacherous frozen mountain passes, he caught the Spanish completely by surprise. At the Battle of Boyacá, he shattered their forces, securing the independence of New Granada, which would become Colombia. From this victory, the dream of Gran Colombia was born, a massive, unified republic encompassing present-day Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, and Panama. Bolívar was its president, its visionary leader. He marched south, liberating Ecuador with the help of his most trusted general, Antonio José de Sucre, after the decisive Battle of Pichincha. Then came the famous Guayaquil Conference in 1822. Here, the two greatest liberators of South America met, Simón Bolívar, the liberator of the North, and José de San Martín, the hero who had freed Argentina and Chile. What happened behind those closed doors remains a subject of historical debate. But the outcome was clear. San Martín, the more cautious of the two, stepped aside, leaving Bolívar to complete the final, most difficult task, the liberation of Peru, the very heart of Spanish power in South America. With Sucre by his side, Bolívar's forces won the critical battles of Junín and Ayacucho in 1824. The Battle of Ayacucho was the final nail in the coffin of Spanish colonial rule. After 3 centuries, the fight for South American independence was finally over. At the height of his power, Bolívar governed a territory larger than Alexander the Great's empire. He was the most powerful man on the continent. But the dream of a united South America was already beginning to crumble. The vast distances, regional rivalries, and personal ambitions of other leaders made governing Gran Colombia an impossible task. The very people who had hailed him as a liberator now saw him as a dictator. He was accused of being a tyrant, a new Napoleon. There were assassination attempts, political betrayals, and civil wars. The nation he had forged with his own blood was breaking apart. Exhausted, disillusioned, and suffering from tuberculosis, Bolívar resigned the presidency in 1830. He planned to go into exile in Europe, the continent where his journey had begun. But he would never make it. Alone and impoverished, the man who had liberated millions died in Santa Marta, Colombia, at the age of just 47. His last words were a lament for his shattered dream, "I have plowed the sea." He died believing he was a failure, but history has rendered a different verdict. Though his grand republic did not survive, the nations he brought into existence did. His ideas on governance, justice, and liberty continue to inspire and provoke debate across the continent and the world. Simón Bolívar was a complex, flawed, and brilliant man, a soldier, a statesman, a visionary, and an idealist. He was El Libertador, and his epic struggle for freedom is a timeless story of human spirit against impossible odds. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the life of a true giant of history. If you found this story as fascinating as we do, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the past. We'll see you next time.